everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We're going to give everyone a few minutes to join and get situated. I hope you grabbed a snack or perhaps even a late lunch, but welcome today. My name is Vinnu Deshetty. I'm the event tech here at EVA, a virtual conference platform and registration. We love hosting these webinars and bringing on experts in the technology field who really can make it seem more real, more accessible for us in order to make our lives easier and also get with the times of modern technology so that we can offer more to our associations, to our members, as well as get more insights with the data that we collect. If you've heard me talk before, I love data, and this is just a continuation of this webinar in terms of talking about all of the data that we're collecting. So a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. This is a CAE and CMP qualified session today. So if you stay with us for the whole session, which I hope you do, you'll get a certificate of attendance from us via email. If you have any questions about that, definitely drop me a line. We'll share my contact information in the chat in a few minutes, but we'll definitely get that out to you. And we have lots to cover today. So let me get started. Let me start off by introducing Matt Peterson with Maple. Hi, Matt. Welcome.
Hi, Vinnu. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, great. Well, last time in our last session, I think it was a great start off to have the discussion about just integrations between our great platforms, and not necessarily just ours, but also just any virtual conference platform and an LMS. And I think there's a lot of buzz. I'm hearing a lot of associations starting to think about, they have this great conference content. How do they extend it? What technology do they use? What makes sense? There's a lot of just buzz, and I'm so excited to hear about that because I think great things are coming for all of us in this space. Do you mind spending a few minutes just kind of recap for us what we talked about last time?
Yeah, sure. So this is really part 2 of the webinar, but don't be concerned if you didn't get to see the first one. I'll kind of briefly recap it. This, I would say, is the more technical part of it, because we're actually going to be talking about the integration of an LMS with your virtual conference content. So in our last webinar, we kind of talked about the growth of virtual conference content, right? Not everyone was always recording their sessions, but if you're virtual or hybrid, or even in person, there's probably a good chance that you're recording a lot of your content, and it's great educational content. We also talked about the growth of e-learning and how both of those have been really fueled by the pandemic. Because of this growth too, there's been huge developments in the technology and the virtual conference software, as well as learning management systems. Engagement's a huge word that you keep on hearing over and over again. So both softwares are really looking at how can we make the content more engaging. We're also using artificial intelligence to aid in suggesting learning paths of recommended courses. So lots and lots going on in both of our spaces right now, which is a very exciting time to be part of the industry. And with more people working remotely, there's a need to train and professionally develop the workforce virtually. So that's kind of fueling a lot of this growth too. So last time we talked about what is a virtual conference platform, and we also talked about what is an LMS and the need to integrate the two. So integrating the two is not always the right choice, as we kind of talked about last time. But when you have the right content, the right audience, the right technology, and the right business case, it is a great way to extend the life of your virtual conference content. And not only extend that, but you can also monetize on it. You can also increase the member engagement, and you can provide a unified user experience and track the analytics and data that you talked about, Vinnu, and also track continuing education units and certifications. In the last webinar, we provided a pre-integration checklist, which should not be missed. So that would be something I would definitely pull out from last time, and you can view our previous webinar to get that. We also discussed the various data points in the two systems, and that is where we begin our discussion today. But if you did miss the first webinar, it can be found on either of our websites, evareg.com or MapleLMS.com for on-demand viewing, and we really encourage you to pull that out.
You know, and I was remiss. We usually like to do a couple of polls just to get a sense of where everybody's at and what everybody's doing. But I got to say, I was really, not surprised, but I was excited to see who was registering for this webinar today in terms of what departments were participating. And we have got a great mix of people that are IT directors or membership, meeting planners, education. It's a great mix. And what that is telling me is that everyone's interested. They're interested in learning more. They're probably discussing it. So I'm really excited. We're actually going to do a follow-up to this session where we're hoping to do a meeting and we can actually have everyone online talking about what's happening in their own associations and kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. But in the meantime, here's the poll. I totally digress, but here's the first poll, just kind of getting a sense of what kind of platforms you are using right now. And pick all of that apply, and it seems like there's a good mix out there. So that's great to see. And, you know, integrations can happen in many different ways. So I think even though today we're specifically talking about virtual conference and LMS, I think you'll see a lot of things that you can take away for your integrations into other systems as well. And let me also introduce, we have Alexis with us, our Zoom tech. Thank you, Alexis, so much for keeping us on track and very technically happy here. So if you have any questions or need any help, Alexis is here to help us. Alexis, why don't you share this poll so everybody can kind of see who else is doing what. And Matt, I'm just going to kick this off to you. Let's talk about those data points. You know, in the last session, like you mentioned, we talked about what are some of the different data points in the two systems. And now, you know, that's a great starting point, right? Like just knowing what you've got, like doing inventory in your closet. Talk to us a little bit more about the data.
Yeah, so when we talk about integration, it's actually sharing or writing back these data points between the two systems. So you really need to think about which data points you want to carry over from one system to the other. So in the virtual platform, you'll have your actual recorded sessions. You'll have engagement points for users, speakers, such as time spent in the sessions, responses to polls, questions, surveys, and a whole bunch more data. In the LMS, you're going to have also engagement points, but they vary a little different. They'll be such as the progress of the learner on any completed courses, exams. You would also maybe have results and or grades on those exams, any badges that they maybe earned, any certifications. Continuing education unit credits is very, very important. And you'll have much more. Essentially, you'll basically have a learner's transcript, and those are the key data points that would exist in an LMS. If your members are attending a virtual, hybrid, or in-person education conference, you may want that information to appear in the transcript of that member or learner in your LMS. You may also want to see the level of engagement that member or learner had at the conference. So that could also carry over. Okay, we're going to launch another poll here too, if you'd like to participate and share. And this one really kind of talks about where you are in your integration journey. So we'd love for you to participate. If you want to, you can participate in that poll right now. And then we'll move on to the next slide as people are answering that. So here we're talking about before you sync your data, you really need to consider where the data is currently, what the data looks like before integrating the two. So you're going to have probably one of three possible scenarios, with the first one being data exists in your virtual conference platform, or maybe even in an event app, and you just integrated with an LMS. The second case may be if data exists in your LMS and you're just integrated with a virtual conference platform. And then lastly, the third case may be if data is existing in both your virtual conference platform and your LMS, but they're in silos. So how do you connect those two? So that's what we're going to kind of move on to next, is talking about integrating those data points.
And Alexis, let's share this poll. I think we've got a good selection here, and everyone's in their own journey in different places, and it's great to see. And I'm excited for those of you who have started the journey and you're learning along the way, and then those that are in that strategy session as well, just thinking about what you need to do and how to get there. In our last webinar session about getting ready for this integration, we do talk about these scenarios of, you're having these data silos, and really thinking through, because not everything needs to go into an integration, right? They don't always, every piece of data doesn't need to sync up with each other, and really thinking through that. So if you need to revisit that session, I hope you do. It's really interesting to take a look at and really think through that piece. It's not something that you can, say, okay, let me do this integration, just do it right away. Really think through those data points. And that brings me to a technical expert. Domnish, welcome today. Domnish is also with Maple and works very closely with Matt on the technical side. And I'm really excited to hear from you, Domnish, because, when I do an integration, don't hate me for this, I tend to say, okay, let's just match up the fields and I'm done. And I know that's exactly the wrong thing to do. And when we're talking about something much more complex, like a virtual conference platform and LMS, many more things to think about. And we actually, Domnish, before you begin, we actually have another poll that we have. Alexis, if you can launch that poll for us. This is about how do you feel about doing the integration yourself? Do you guys, in your organization, in your association, do you feel like you have the technical skills? Do you have enough staff? Sometimes you have the technical skills, but there's just not enough time in the day. And I am in both of those camps. There is not enough time in technical skills. And then sometimes you do have a great team, you're on the right path, but sometimes that strategy piece is what's going to take some time for you. And then, it's okay not knowing what you need right now. So why don't we share those results? And and I will say to you, there's no shame in not knowing what you need, because that's part of this process, right? That's why you guys are here today. So Domnish, show us what we're getting ourselves into when we're thinking about an integration.
Thank you, Vinnu. Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Matt, for the summary of the previous webinar. And I'll try to make it easy for everyone to understand integration step. I understand it is not that easy, but I'll try to cover the best practices which everyone should follow while planning for any such integration or for any integration project. The step one is strategy perspective. You need to define. I'm assuming that you have already decided to integrate. So you have to create your team, and you need to define the integration stakeholders, and the integration stakeholders should be from your vendors team, which is, like in this case, it is a virtual conference app and LMS. So you should talk to them and make sure that you verify that their system is actually can be integrated with other system. Most of the modern systems do give interfaces to integrate with other system, but you just need to verify it with them. And then involve their team in the integration process, because you would need a little bit of a hand-holding from them about the system, where the data is, what data is available to, exposed to APIs and things. So you should surely involve both the system team in your team. And then you should, if you have an in-house development team, make sure they are part of this. And if you're using any professional service provider, you should add them in your team too. So that's the first step. Define your integration team, and this should be the team which should start and will finish the complete integration. So keep them part of your project. Now the next step is you need to define your goals. What are you expecting from from this integration, how the system is expected to behave. So like in this case, we have virtual conference system and LMS. If I need to define the success criteria for it, I would say that it should have a very smooth user experience, so that when a user log into this system, it should be able to check what are the upcoming conferences, or if I'm attending a conference, I should be able to attend the session, see the session, and as soon as the session is completed, I should be able to get the promised credits, or if there is any gamification points I would earn, I should be able to immediately get that. And when the conference is over, I should be able to see the on-demand content. I should be able to see my credits and certifications. And if I'm a user in LMS, I should be able to engage with the video streaming, which is happening with the from the conferencing app. So these would be my goal, and these are not all of them. I'm just giving some examples so that you can very well define it. So your team should be able to define what are you expecting from the integrated system. It is a good practice to involve your business and customer success team in this step, so that they can define success criteria for the project from the customer perspective. So that's the step 2. Now, the next step is to define data flow based on the user experience. So you have documented the user stories, and you have documented the user experiences. Now you should know that how the data is going to flow from one system to other. As Matt just was describing, you have different data object in both the system. Like in a virtual conference system, we have conference registration data, we have session, workshop, roundtable, trade show data. In LMS, we have courses, on-demand video, credits, assessment, certificates, all that data objects there. We should capture the data flow. For example, what should happen when once a session ends? What all data has to be, go to the different systems. So like if a session has just ended, the attendee list, all the user credit, any user interaction point should move to the other system in both the system automatically. So all these points and events should be very clearly defined, which would be your data flow between the objects. So that should be documented. Now, the next step is to map data models of both the system. Data models are very simple, the entities, and you need to define the relationship between them. So here you would need help from your, the vendors. So the based on the user stories you have created, you need to inquire about the data models from both the team, the conferencing team as well as LMS, and you should be able to visually represent the data models. So I should be able to visually see that, okay, this data is here in this table in this particular system, and this data is in this LMS in this particular table. So you should be able to visually represent all of that. Once we have listed these models, we need to explore the data fields of both the system. Like Vinnu mentioned, this is the step, which is actually the 5th step, not the starting point. So you have to, now get into details of the data object, detail all the fields there. Like if, for example, like in a virtual conferencing app, you may have an attendee object, which may have attendee name, attendee email address, attendee title, and similarly in the LMS, it may be learner first name, learner last name, title, location, language, etc. there. So in both the system, now you need to connect this attendee data with the LMS learner data. So there need to be mapping of these fields, which is the next step for us. So once we have listed all the data models for both the system, we'll define the mapping. The mapping means simply that which data from system A would be moving to system B in which particular field. So like if I say attendee F name or first name in the virtual conferencing app has to go to the learner's first name in the LMS system. So I'll define that mapping. We'll define the unique keys, like how would you identify that this particular data, this particular user data is in this system. There has to be a unique key, and that like in this particular case, an email ID, which is a unique thing, can be assumed that it is the data object of that particular user, and we would be mapping based on the email address. So similarly, you would define all the data fields and mapping for both the system, and then you need to define. The next step is to define the data flow methods. So now data flow methods, when I say, it is basically you need to define this data will go in a synchronous way or asynchronous way. And this is a design, this is a design question, and this is basically based on the integration goals and user experience you have created. For example, when a user register in a conference, you need to at the same time register user in the LMS. Now this has to be real time. So this cannot be an asynchronous process. But at the same time, when a conference is closing, the videos can be uploaded as an on-demand videos to the LMS system in an asynchronous way. So you need to define the synchronous and asynchronous process so that when you write methods or you write the code, you would define it in that way. Now the next step is to define data flow events. Like similarly, as I mentioned over here, you define the particular events where the data synchronization will be executed, like when a user register, when a session start, or when a session ends, and or when a user is, when a new conference is created, it should be notified to the users in LMS. So all that, these are all data initiation events. So you should define them while defining the complete integration plan. Now comes the important thing. You have created all that data models, data mapping. You have documented the data flow. Now you need actual APIs for from both the system to execute this data integration plan. Now, most of the system do offer APIs, and so you should be able to get it from your vendor. You need to list down the APIs which is required based on the data flow which you have created. So, like if a user registration, there should be an API in the LMS system to register a user. So when if there is a registration happening in the virtual conferencing app, somebody coming there and registering for an conference, you should be able to register it in the LMS. If it is already registered, you should run an update process. So all that API should be available to you, like create user, update user, and so all that API you should check, and then you should create a flow for APIs. So like if to execute one particular flow, I may need to call 10 APIs. So I should be able to create that flow of the APIs. And secondly, at this step, I need to figure it out that if there are, there is any logic which I need to write for data processing between this layer only. So do I need to process any data? For example, if there is a field in the virtual conferencing system, which is a different type, so I may need to cast that particular field to get that data populated in LMS. All that logic has to be written at this stage. Test these APIs for good for your expected output. At the same time, ask your QA team to write test cases and expected results so that they can, in parallel, prepare the test scenarios. Now, we suggest to follow Agile method, for running any integration projects, because it's important that you do it in a small sprints based on the different user stories. So and then your team can start writing based on the sprint. Now, you write each sprint, test it, push it to sandbox things, and then deploy it on the stage for your team to check. Once all that is done, you're about to get into the production mode, test your complete integration, verify and validate each data for any data duplicity, data mismatch and things. And then in parallel, train your staff for the new version, which is going to come out, and then deploy it on production. So there's the final step. You should deploy it on the production, inform all the users that you got a new version, and that would be the end to your successful integration. Let me tell you, integration projects are the most difficult project I was seeing the poll result also, and so it is important that these should be handled with really in a good way, and should be handled by professionals. And you should surely follow the best practices. Yeah,
Yeah, thanks, Danish. I think there's obviously value in kind of just getting, going into the process, trying to start and learn as you go. But then also kind of stopping and really thinking through, is this really what I want and what I need for the organization, for the members? What does that journey look like? So that's very detailed, and I'm sure you could probably do an hour session on each step, which we won't do today, that we can do later. But Danish, going through all of this, and you've done so many integrations between many systems, but can talk to us a little bit some of the tips that you have for us to help us through this process.
So the most important tip, I would say, that you should, as I was mentioning in these tips, the important thing is that you should surely write down the expectation from the system, because that is the basis of you deciding whether the integration was successful or it failed. So you should write that. Then make sure that once the integration has been done, your team is continuously checking the system logs, any kind of error logs, because the systems are talking to each other. There may be scenarios which you missed it. Then there is an health check performance, which is required for the performing health checks for your data, which is very important. And then in parallel, keep testing your integration for different scenarios, and make sure that your vendors are updating you for any kind of update which they are planning in the future, because one of the important thing with the integration projects is, as soon as the one system release a update, the integration stop working. That's most common scenario. So you should be talking to the vendors, always asking them if they can give you the sandbox, for any updates which they are planning to, so that you can test the upcoming scenarios. And then in parallel, create support documents, videos for your team as well as for the users, and make sure that both the system are working together. Check their reports, dashboard, if it is showing the right data, and make sure that the things are in place, and keep training your users, because this integration would require you to create support knowledge base and the different videos. So keep training your users. But important is that, and again, don't hardcore. I mean, if your team has hard coded anything, that is going to be an issue for you. So one of the most of the project which I have seen, that because the team keep changing, and there's somebody wrote some code which is as soon as there's some update happen, and this code is not working. And so make sure that there is no hard coding anywhere. and keep your vendors in loop for any updates.
I almost think of that as like you're buying a house and you can paint the walls, you can make your updates and upgrades, but really think twice about knocking down a wall and putting in another room, because that may or may not be what the next buyer wants. Is that kind of similar to that?
Right.
Dominic, in terms of like timeline, I think we all like things done yesterday, but as you have reminded us that this is something that you really need to think through. There's the strategy piece, there's the integration piece, the testing piece. Can you give us a sense of timing? How much time should this take us, after we get through strategy? Because strategy could involve so many people and parties and just internal politics, but in terms of the actual integration, how much time should we allot for this?
So I would say that if there's a project similar to the virtual conferencing app and LMS integration, I would say that once you have decided all the the strategy decision has been taken, so from that day it should be around 8 to 12 weeks of time for such projects for integration, and that is for the development, and then you keep 2-3 weeks for your user acceptance testing and making sure all the scenarios are properly tested. So and as I defined in the guideline, make sure that you create small sprints so that you can see what is coming, and in case there are any problems, you would get to know them very soon, rather than later in this stage of the project. You get to know them early. So make sure you do it in the smaller sprint, and make sure that but in terms of the time, you should keep around 10 to 12 weeks time for such projects.
Right. That's good to know. Good to know. So no more, I need to get this done by our next conference that's being done in a month. That's not going to happen. Okay. Right. We have a question. I know that you have more information to share with us, but I do want to ask, we got a question from one of our guests. And this has to do with, I know a lot of what you're talking about is data, but there is a big thing of the videos. How do you deal with the videos, whether they live in Vimeo, whether they live in the virtual conference platform or YouTube or whatnot? What does that, how do you easily migrate that from whatever system into your LMS? Do you have recommendations there?
Right. So the most of the LMS store the video data and their own storage, and that is one of the advantage I see using the LMS. You do not need to put your videos across the internet for different at different providers like Vimeo or YouTube. They all offer you with the limited capacity, plus their additional charges to it. But most of the LMS, I can bet for MapleLMS, there is unlimited storage which we offer, and then the most of the LMS has inbuilt functionality where they can actually get your video from any of these third-party sites and can import it into the system. So it's a one-time process. And secondly, if you're integrating, like if there is an integration with the virtual conferencing system, as soon as the conference is over or the session is over, we can write an integration code which will convert the video and push it to as an on-demand video in the LMS. So in terms of storage, would suggest to use the LMS, and in the integration, it would be, and many times after the conference, the conference teams are too occupied during the conference. They post conference, they sometimes get delayed in pushing it to the users. So if the system is integrated, it would automatically get posted to your LMS, and that would be an advantage to your users, and you would be from a user experience perspective, also you would always be connected with them.
And just to talk on the video standpoint, from a virtual conference platform side, if you are working with downloading those videos, editing the videos, and getting those uploaded. And for those of you that are guests who have done this, know that it's not a matter of skill, it's much more a matter of time. Downloading video just is very time intensive. Editing them can actually be the fastest of this process, but then re-uploading, rendering that video and getting it uploaded into a server is where the time comes in. Because I know we've had a lot of clients saying, well, why does it take so long? Well, it's not us, it's the actual system and the technology. It just takes a while. So if you have a great way to import this without having to do all of that really tedious process, it's not even tedious, just time. It just takes time. I've been in situations where we've had I've had 4 computers running. They're all rendering videos at the same time. I can go have dinner and come back. But just for those of you that video just really requires a lot of understanding and patience. So if you can do an integration, it will save you so much heartache and so much time. So definitely something to consider. But thank you very much for asking that question. Dominic, I have another question here, testing. In terms of who do you test with? Internally, I know when I'm working on something, even editing a paper or anything, when I look at something for so long, I know how to trick my mind tricks myself and not seeing the errors anymore. So who do you recommend to be on that testing team?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Vinnu, because most of the integrations are handled by the technical team. Sometimes they miss the customer perspective to it or the user perspective to it. So as I mentioned in the guideline, you should include your business team or the customer success team at the start when you are documenting your goals, as well as you should involve them in the testing. So they should really test it from the user perspective, how a user is going to use it, what would be the user experience to it. And then you have your testing team who is going to, ideally breaking down each user experience point, user story point, and writing their own test cases for it. And then making sure that all the test scenarios are working as expected. But just to answer your question, I would suggest to involve your business and the customer success team in the testing process, so that there is a customer perspective is tested also when you are working on the integration projects.
Yeah, what I think is great, especially with everyone that we've got joining us from so many different departments, I think this is a great testament that this is how it should be done, right? Like best case scenario would be involve membership, involve the exhibit sales team, if that's a separate team, your meetings team, your IT team. It's really when all of these people from different backgrounds can bring a great perspective to it. That's I think an ideal situation. And if anyone has done that, I'd love to hear about it and have a sidebar with you just to talk about your experience with that and how that has really affected your organization, because I'm really hoping that that's been a positive experience to you. And then, we've got a great comment here from another guest who says, don't overlook the board members. And I think you're absolutely right. But all board members are not equal. So I'm sure as an association, you want to be careful, but they tend to be the most involved, right? The most engaged and are more vested in it than anyone else and really have that outside perspective. So I think that's a great addition. Thank you so much, Dennis. Let's see here. Dominic, I know that you have, go ahead. Do you have something else? I know you have one more slide for us.
No, I'm just adding to this particular comment, and I remember we were doing some integration, and we had a customer who were very excited about that integration, and they volunteered to work with us and test that particular thing, and that really helped us a lot. So in some time, I mean, if you are working on such project, you should keep everyone informed about it. So you may get surprised, and you may get your customer asking you that this looks really interesting. We would like to be the first one to see it, and volunteer testing for it. So and if your customer can test it for you, that's your almost like guarantee that the system is gonna be very good for you.
I mean, guys, think about it. I mean, when we have our phones do an update, right? Like you get an update on your phone, you get a little note, whether it's a pop-up message, notification, text that an update's been made. Is that helpful for you guys? I mean, I like to know those things. Yeah. Okay, Thomas.
Yeah, that's how you build the excitement. You should keep people informed about it. Yeah.
It's coming, a new LMS integration. Yeah. Or need a cheerleader for your project there. And I think, also it's technology, right? No matter how tech savvy your members are, having something new and exciting can make your association just look like you're catering to your members, catering to their technology needs and what's coming. And in the end, it really, it's about what you're also doing in the background of collecting information so you can do more for them. So technology, data, they're good things, not something to shy away from. So Dom, that's your last slide with us today about the pitfalls. What are things that we should be avoiding when we're doing these integrations?
Yeah, I think the few points I spoke about, but let me again rephrase this one. So there are many pitfalls which you have to avoid. Actually, we could only cover a few here, but I think these are the important ones. So most of the project fail because they didn't start with the clear scope. You are for such projects which are integration projects, you should be very clear how system is going to behave, and that is important to document at the start, because that is your base of your the complete project. So you're going to create data models, you're going to create data flow, APIs. Everything is based on the scope which you have finalized. And using the Agile method, the advantage you get that you can, while you are in the project, if you find something interesting that this should be another scenario which should get covered, you can very much add it, but there has to be a very clear scope when your team starts. Secondly, you should surely consider security and data privacy, which is very important. There are compliances, there are laws around it. So make sure when you are integrating, when you are having a data flow from system A to system B, the security of the data privacy of your users is considered in your data integration plan. Third is you should take the custom configuration into the account. Most of the time, what happens, I'm working on an integration project, but that customer may have an custom field. There is a custom data which has been added for any of the system. And when you're planning your integration, you started with the data model, which is maybe a little old data model, and you have not considered the custom configuration to it. So when you integrate, either the custom configuration is going to be breaking there, or your integration will break. So it's important that when you're preparing your data models, the custom configurations are considered over there. Then again, the integration goals, your team who is preparing for test plan, the team who is writing out the code, they should know that what are the integration goals have been defined. Propagation of bad data. Make sure that you have a process in your integration where you're not pushing the bad data to other system, or there is no duplicity of the data which you are creating in terms of storing at two places. So all that should be considered. Again, the important point, you should always involve the professional team and data experts while planning any such project, because these are complex projects. From a software perspective, the software projects, the integration is supposed to be the most challenging project. Again, improper field mapping, data type mismatch, all that has to be initially thought about, and data objects has to be created in a way so that you don't land into a data type mismatch. Uh, Hard coding, avoid any kind of hard coding. Your team has to avoid, so that hard coding creates a problem in any updates and maintenance, and you would get to know it later. So make sure that there are check and balances in place so that your team are not writing any kind of code which is hard coded for that particular situation. And then another important thing is load. Test your system with a lot of load. Most of the system, like virtual conference app or LMS, their APIs are designed for one particular load. And uh, uh, like Salesforce, when you work with the Salesforce or any CRM, when they open the API, there is a limit what they put that this API, these many APIs can be called in a second and thing. So you should test your system, see what is going to be load on your particular system. Make sure that limit is known to you, and you should test your system, this integration system, on that particular load. So load testing is important, because what happened if you have not done the load testing and your system is live, and one day there is some conference happening, and you will get a peak in that particular conference while that event is on, and that the participation luckily is more than what you were expecting, and your integration stop working. So you would have a very you would not have a good time there. So the important is that you test for those, that expected load. Make sure that system is functionally working okay on all that particular user load on that. So these are the few pitfall which I can visualize.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. If anyone has any questions, definitely put those in the chat here or in the Q&A. Happy to ask Dominish those questions for us. Dominish, I do have a few questions for you here. In terms of the data, you talked about privacy and security, and that always makes me very nervous. I'm always wanting to make sure that we take care of, it goes beyond email opt-outs, right? Making sure that we're not spamming people, but also looking at what data should be encrypted and not. And typically when I think about the data that we're collecting for virtual conferences, it's pretty harmless. There's contact information, there's sometimes there's demographic information depending on the association and what they're trying to capture. And obviously credit cards, we don't keep those credit cards because that's going to pass through the merchant processor. But in terms of the LMS, is there any data that you can think of that you think should be encrypted for security reasons?
So the one data which is, has to be encrypted is your authentication data. That is your password and, the information related to, anyone should not be able to. So you should have good rules for the password, so that, that is also an important thing. So plus authentication data should be encrypted. And secondly, if you are interfacing with any other system, you would keep some, tokens and things in your at your system. So that tokens and everything should be very much, the encrypted. So that when you need to handshake with the APIs, there is an authentication happened there also. So that authentication keys and everything has to be encrypted. Now, in terms of like in virtual conferencing app as well as in the LMS, we are not keeping any personal data, which is sensitive personal data, I would say. But for some of the customers, we they want to keep some additional information related to their employees and things, because we like an LMS work with the HRMS system too. So in that particular case, we need to encrypt those data. That could be data which is defined by from the customer side, that this is sensitive based on their on compliance system. So we need to encrypt that particular data. So it is important, to, the privacy laws are changing very, very fast, very quickly. So it is always a good practice, even if it is not sensitive, but you feel that it could be, and it is not a public information. So one very, very good check, which, most of the software professionals follow, is it this information is publicly, can be made visible? If the answer is no, make sure that is encrypted.
I think we addressed this in a past webinar where we talked about, once you've established your data security privacy policies as an association, take that policy across all your entire technology stack. Keep those policies consistent so that you're following what you've established as being the best practice for your association. That's one thing I have learned along the way. I tend to think, I'm glad you shared the piece about the authentication and about the tokens, because someone like me, I think data. I think just what are we storing and the pieces that I'm exporting, importing out. But I often forget about the technical piece that you shared with us. So thank you for sharing that. Another question that I have for you is, in terms of the technical team, you've got your internal team as an association, you've got your virtual conference team, and then you've got your LMS team. Who's taking the lead on this integration? Who should be the one that says, this is what we're doing and managing that process?
So the answer really depends. We know who has initiated the integration. So if I would say, if it is an association, they have both the vendors and they would like to initiate an integration, they should talk to the vendor. It may be possible that the LMS vendor or the virtual conferencing vendor, they may have this integration as a part of their roadmap in the upcoming future, right? So you can just validate with them that, hey guys, we are planning to, we are buying this, we have these two systems, and we just want to check if there is a plan to integrate both. If it is not, if they have a plan, you should ask them if they can, make it little quicker. If not, you can ask them that if it is in your product roadmap, and would you like to take it as a project? That would be good, because that will save a lot of your energy and the issues. But if that's not the case, and you have to, both the vendors comes back and say that we have an APIs, if you want to integrate, you can integrate both the system. In that case, you have to decide that if you have a good development team in house, you basically work with them, or you have an integrator, you hire integrators. There are professional service integrators which you can hire, and they can work on this particular integration. But the important thing here is that these projects are complex projects. Make sure that you have the right people at the right job, and if you hire an integrator, they would be the one who would take the ownership of this integration. If you give it as a project to maybe the LMS vendor, it would be the LMS vendor who would be the owner of this particular integration. Similarly, if you give it to the virtual conferencing system, they would be the owner of it. So my suggestion would be to first explore it with the vendors, because if they would do it, and if it is part of their product roadmap, you will save a lot of time, energy, money. If not, then make sure that you hire the right professionals, right set of people to do this integration.
Oh, great. Yeah, and I think part of that is also when you're searching for a technology, whether it's an LMS or a virtual platform or even AMS, is having a really good partner that is on board to work with you for an integration or whatever comes down the path. If that's important for you, is something to explore before bringing them on as a partner, because the last thing would be is like, what? We don't want to do that. But I can't imagine any partner saying that, but it's good to explore. Well,
Yeah.
thank you both, Matt and Damish, for joining me today. I have learned a lot. I've learned that integration can't be done overnight, and you need 8 to 12 weeks before you implement that. And it's great also to hear about all the steps, you know, the data points, and really thinking through that and thinking through the strategy. Thank you for both. But before we leave, Matt and Damish, Matt, and I'll start off with you. Any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with us before we leave?
Yeah, you know, as I listened to you and you talked about putting a team together for it, it just brought to mind, even if you don't integrate your two systems, but you have recorded conference content that resonates with your attendees and has some staying power, I encourage you to upload it into your LMS and try and monetize it when appropriate. And then if you do decide to integrate, I encourage you to get all your stakeholders together like we talked about. I have experience in events, education, and technology. So when those teams get together, I think magic can happen. But like you mentioned, you might also want to include maybe some membership people and maybe even some board members. But there'll be a great project management team for the integration, but also on an ongoing basis, if you can create some synergies between those departments. There may be minor adjustments you can make to your conference content that will make sense to ensure it's appropriate for your on-demand and e-learning audience that you have as users in your LMS. Or you may be missing some core material in a given learning path for a particular role or profession, and that can be fulfilled at a conference while you have all your subject matter experts together. So take advantage of creating some synergy between those teams, and it'll make for great content, which ultimately leads to increased non-dues revenue and also member engagement, and that ultimately leads to overall retention rates within your organization.
That's that magic, Matt. Thank you. And Damish, you've got the magic wand for us. So what do you have to share with us before we leave?
Right, Vinnu, I see there are two questions. We answered half of it. So can I just answer that also?
Please do. I thought we answered both.
Yeah. Okay. The first one is like, the question is basically if we can pull the information of a speaker's description, tag, etc. to LMS. So, the benefit of both the system integration is that you don't need to duplicate this information. The speaker description is already there in the virtual conferencing one. If you integrate both the system, the user can access both the information. So it's just that you need to make this information visible at the right places, but that could be part of your integration. Secondly, the second question, there is a video library in YouTube, which we would like eventually to live in an LMS. Most of the LMS has an integration with the YouTube. You can directly import YouTube videos in them. I can talk about MapleLMS. We have a module where you can directly import YouTube videos, and you can create an interactive content on top of that. So most of the LMS offer the import part of it. The interactive content part is there in the MapleLMS. You can explore that, but both the things are feasible, very much feasible, what you have asked. Now coming back to the summarizing my comments again, I would say that the integration projects, don't get scared from them. They're complex project, but the benefit which they give you is amazing in terms of the user experience, in terms of the time you save, in terms of the the effort of your staff which you save, and the integration always reduce your chances of making any mistakes which you normally do when you're doing it manually. So I would suggest to plan for an integration wherever you can, so that the system runs in an automated way, and your user will be really pleased to see their experience is the key for any of the company or the or for any product. In case of an association, your members would be your member experience will multiply multifold if you have an integrated system. So that their experience is the key to this thing. So I would say that don't get scared with the integration. There are right set of people who can do this magic for you, and you should surely plan for integrations.
Well, I love all the magic that you shared today and hope that magic can spread across the world. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing all your wisdom with us in terms technically, motivationally. I think this is only going to make a big impact in the association world. I'm excited to see what technology will do for all of us. Thank you all for joining us today. This has been recorded, and you will be getting an email with the recording, the PowerPoint, and also our contact information. I'm sure you will have more questions as you go along your process and your journey. Definitely reach out to Matt and Dominic. They're always willing to help and answer those questions. Check out our future webinars. We love sharing information that we're getting and learning each day about the event tech world and things in associations in general. So check out our webinar schedule and subscribe, and we'll make sure we invite you to the future ones. Thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.